houses, and I hope everyone had a great weekend. I know we did, and we actually dropped our two sons off at camp this morning, which is nice that they're starting to open up some camps for the kids. And it's funny because when you're in a house like ours, we just adopted a new dog, and she's a husky, and she's a talker, and the way of her talking is barking. So now we have two barking dogs. We have three kids that are running around the house. These kids have been home for months now, and this is the first time that I've had a quiet house in months. And it's kind of like when you go to a rock concert, like a loud concert, and you come home to a quiet house and your ears are buzzing. That's exactly what happened to me this morning. The kids left, the dogs calmed down, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's really quiet in here, my ears buzzing. So anyways, I get a quiet house today, at least until 4 o'clock when the kids come home. But anyways, I wanted to talk to you guys about the first house that we ever bought. I've been doing a couple of different videos on it, so if you haven't caught the videos from last week, you can jump on. And we talk about how we acquired the property and the different mistakes we made during the renovation and all the things that went wrong during our first renovation and the lessons that we learned. But today I wanted to talk to you about one of my biggest failures as a real estate investor and how it led me to become, I think, actually a really great real estate investor through my challenges with this first property that we did. Because once we finally finished up the renovation on this property and we got it up on the market and we got through the challenges with the real estate agent that I had hired, we finally found a buyer for it after a few months of it sitting on the market. We had it priced too high. And so we kept lowering the price, and we found a buyer for the property, which is great. I was so excited. Finally, I felt like this is it. We found a buyer. I can sit back. Now I can finally relax. And so we went under contract with this buyer who was getting an FHA loan. And they loved the house. They loved the house. They loved the renovation. It was just the perfect buyer for us. And so we immediately got to work. We sent all the paperwork to the title company. Realtor was happy, I was happy, buyers were happy. We were thinking this is a done deal. They were very qualified, even though they were getting an FHA loan and not putting a lot of money down, but they were qualified for the loan. And so we thought we were good to go. And the very first problem that we ran into was that when we bought the house, I knew it was in a flood zone, and I had asked the owners who inherited the house if they could send me a statement of the flood insurance. And the flood insurance quote was only a couple $100s. For the year. And so I thought, okay, and I didn't do any more due diligence after that. Well, apparently the floodplains, the flood maps had changed, and we were now in the worst flood zone possible. And the previous owner had just been grandfathered in. He was just paying the same rate he had always paid because he owned this house for a long time. And so when we went to go sell the house, the buyers went to go get a flood insurance quote. And I remember this day so well because I was actually driving home. My husband's father had passed away, and it was an emotional event, and me and his mom were driving in the car on the highway back to Georgia. And I got a call from the realtor, and the realtor said, Carrie, the buyers, they went to go get a quote on the flood insurance, and it's a couple $1,000s a year for the flood insurance quote. And I felt my heart rate go up and my blood pressure was going up, and I was driving the car, and all of a sudden my foot apparently started pressing on the gas pedal because I wasn't paying attention. And all of a sudden I'm talking to the realtor and the car's speeding up, and all of a sudden I hear woo, woo, and there's a cop car behind me and he's pulling me over, and I roll down the window and he says, ma'am, you were speeding, can I have your license and registration? And I just broke down in tears because we had just visited Howie's father who was dying and said our goodbyes, and then we were traveling back home, and then I got this news about this house that we had had forever that we were renovating, and we were trying to sell it, and we were trying to get rid of it, and I thought this was a done deal. And I got the information on the flood insurance, and I just broke down to the police officer, and I'm like, and I'm telling him my whole life story about what's happening. And he did give me a warning. He didn't give me a ticket. And I now know not to have those conversations when I'm driving on the road. But I was so nervous that we were not going to be able to sell this house, you guys. This was, I thought no buyer is going to want to buy this house when they're spending a fortune on flood insurance. And obviously now we're in a big flood zone, so that might make buyers a little bit nervous as well, since this house, a creek literally ran through the backyard, which was beautiful. But all of a sudden this beautiful creek was not so beautiful to me because I couldn't sell this house. And my husband and I were coming up with the craziest things, like, okay, well, how can we get rid of this house? Because remember, we had a bank, we had a hard money loan on it that was due. We had private money into it, which we had borrowed from a friend. We had our own money into it, which we had run out of because the renovation went so long, and I just made so many mistakes with the renovation. We had become a distressed seller. We had become a motivated seller at this point. And so we started coming up with like crazy ideas, like what can we do to get this house out of the flood zone? We contacted all these people from the county who came out just to make sure and verify that the house was in a flood zone. We were like, at one point we were like, maybe we can like literally move the house, like take the house and move it. Like I'm sure there are services out there that move 3,000 square feet homes up a hill. And we were like, there has to be a way. And it's funny, I follow Tony Robbins a lot. He's one of my favorite speakers, and he talks about failure a lot because society has taught us to fear failure. And it's a shame, really, because that's what we're teaching a lot of our kids, is to grow up being fearful of failure. And really, it's the only way you can grow in this world is to fail. And I know because I've done it a lot. But Tony Robbins talks about, I had to write this down. I had to listen to the YouTube video on it, and I will post it in this because it's such a good video. But apparently he did like a TED Talk up in Northern California it's been a while now. And it was a 20-minute TED Talk, and he talked about failure. And he was speaking to obviously very educated people, and he said, who in here has failed? And he raised his hand because he's failed quite a bit. He shares his stories all the time. And no one in the room at first raised their hand. And he said, come on, like, I know some of you have failed. Some of you have had to have failed to be sitting here in these chairs right now. There's no way you could be here if you hadn't failed. And so finally people started raising their hands. And so he said, sir, why do you think you failed? And someone in the audience would say, well, I ran out of money. And then someone else would say, well, I didn't have the time. I didn't have the capacity. I didn't have the right employees. I didn't have this and I didn't have that. And then all of a sudden he heard this voice shout out from the back of the room. It was a dark room, so he couldn't see who it was. And someone shouted out that I didn't have enough Supreme Court justices. And it was actually Vice President Al Gore who shouted that out. And as you guys remember, him and Bush Jr., they had tied during that presidential election, and they had to go before the Supreme Court. And he lost because he didn't have the vote of the Supreme Court. And Tony Robbins said, I had to write this quote down, but he said, that's one way to try to explain why you lost becoming president of the United States. But that I wouldn't say that's an accurate reason for why you failed at becoming president of the United States. And at that, the TED Talk was in Northern California, so there was a lot of liberals who, obviously supported Al Gore, and they were all like, oh, like, I can't believe Tony Robbins just said that to Al Gore, right? But he goes to explain that our resources are never the problem when it comes to failure. It's always a lack of resourcefulness. The most successful people in the world didn't have the resources to do what they did. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, you look at these historical figures that did so much for this world and were so successful, and it's because they became resourceful when they didn't have the resources. And I thought back to like my experience with this house, and at the time I had never heard this talk from Tony Robbins, but I truly feel like we got through this experience because we got resourceful, and we started thinking like of every possible way we could sell this house, like just even ridiculous things like moving the house up a hill, which honestly we really looked into, and it's not very easy to do. And so we started getting resourceful, and we started calling everyone. We started calling flood insurance specialists. I tapped into my real estate investing coaching program that I was in at the time, which I totally felt a failure at because I was in this coaching program and I was doing my first deal and I was about to lose a lot of money and all my time. And we eventually found this flood insurance specialist. This was so many hours on the phone, you guys, just trying to find the right person. And we finally found this flood insurance specialist through someone who I had talked to. And he basically had a program because a lot of homeowners had a lot of hardship when all of these flood insurance rates changed, and all of a sudden houses that were in a flood zone were no longer, and houses that were not in flood zones were now in flood zones, and it was financially impacting homeowners. And so they came up with this program where the homeowner could start at basic grandfathered rate. So, I think at that time it was like $300 a year was what the previous owner was paying. And so he could grandfather them in at that rate that it used to be at. And then over time it would increase, but it could only increase a certain percentage every year. And then it was at a max after a certain period of time. And so we presented this offer to the buyers and said, we'll give you a slight discount. And we found this flood insurance specialist who will give you this rate. And you're going to basically start at the grandfathered rate of like $300 a year, and it may or may not go on up after that. And they loved the house so much that they ended up accepting that offer. And we were like, oh, great, like we can move on. We're gonna sell this house finally. So we got past the flood insurance issue, and then all of a sudden, the bank comes back and they appraised the house, and the house appraised. And then the bank came back and said, oh, we have to appraise the house again. Because when they looked at public record, we had more than doubled the value of the home in a very short period of time. And the bank doesn't know how much money you put into it. We could have been underwater, but the bank said, well, you've more than doubled the home, the value of the home, and it's been a short period of time, so now we have to do a second appraisal on it. And I'm like, second appraisal? Come on. And now we're under contract with these buyers for, I think it was now a month and a half since we had went under contract with them because we had to work through the flood insurance issue, and now we had to schedule this second appraisal. So we scheduled the second appraisal, and a few things come back which they weren't sure that they were going to, we were going to have to do some repairs. So I think we did those repairs. And then all of a sudden, so now it's like 2 months have gone by that we're under contract with these buyers, and we're sweating it and they're sweating it because they want the home and we obviously want to sell the home. And the bank comes back. This is right before Christmas, y'all. We were supposed to close before Thanksgiving. Now we're going into Christmas. And the lender comes back and says, oh, we need to see a copy of the inspection report. And I'm like, okay, I've never had a lender ask me that. So I sent them a copy of the inspection report because that was a requirement. And then they started coming back and saying, well, there's things on this inspection report that we're not sure we want to lend on, and we're not sure about the structural integrity of this and that. And it was ridiculous. It was almost like this lender didn't want to lend on this home, and they were finding every excuse to not give this loan to the buyers. And so again, we had to get resourceful. And it got to the point, you guys, at one point, I felt like we're never gonna sell this house. I felt like such a failure. I remember Cameron was really little, he was a baby. And I remember one afternoon putting him down for a nap, and I just went for a nap also. And I was like, you know what, I'm done. We're gonna lose money, we're gonna lose the house. I'm just tired, and I'm just gonna go to bed and be depressed about this. And I got up and obviously got over it, and we started to get resourceful again. And so we had our contractor come over, and he basically had to write on a letterhead that everything was structurally fine, that these repairs were made, that it just went on and on and on. So we were supposed to close like before Thanksgiving. It was like a 30-day close. We ended up closing in January. This was 3 months under contract with these buyers. After I had gone way over budget, way over time on the renovation. We had this house for, I don't know, a year. It wasn't supposed to be that long. But the point of the story is a few things. I have so much to say about this today, and I'm sorry I'm rambling on about it. But I've been a distressed seller before. I've been a motivated seller before. I've been in the position of a lot of homeowners that we helped in the past, and I think that has made me who I am today as the investor that I've been today, and all the homeowners that we've helped in the past. I truly believe it's because I have been in their position before. I have been a motivated seller before, and I've had to get resourceful on my own properties, but as well as the homeowners that call us. Not every homeowner who calls us has a simple situation where we just buy it from them and that's it. Sometimes it requires a little bit of creative thinking, especially if the home is underwater, or if it's in foreclosure, or if it has just a ton of repairs and there's just not a lot of equity in it at the end of the day. We've had to get resourceful, just like we've had to with our own properties. So for my investor friends out there, take failure as an opportunity, because this was my first house that I ever renovated, that I ever bought as an investor. I think I even bought this house before we ever bought our primary home. So this was the very first one I had ever purchased, and I was about to fail big time on it. And we didn't end up making as much money on it at the end, and we made a little bit, but the lessons that I learned from that property were way more value than I would ever get, out of the money that we had gotten had it been just a straightforward project. And so that led me to the next project, to the next project, to the next project. And so there's going to be properties where, you know, some of us lose money. We have. There's going to be properties where you become a motivated seller and a distressed seller. But you know what? Now you know what it's like to be in that situation when you're helping homeowners in that situation. And so anyways, I think that's it for today. I have so much more to say, but we'll end it there. If you or anyone you know has a home that you need to sell, if it has repairs, if it's underwater, if it's in foreclosure, please give us a call. We have been in that situation before on the other end when we were selling our houses. We've had to get creative, we've had to get resourceful, and I implement these same strategies on my own houses that I do with homeowners when they give us a call. So I'd be happy to talk to you. I'd happy to learn your situation and make an offer on your home. And that's it for today. So I'll see you guys on the next video tomorrow. And I hope you have a nice, quiet, and peaceful day like I'm gonna have in this beautifully wonderful, quiet home with no boys for the next few hours. Thanks, bye.